we are going to read this article, the really big one. And as Vieno has pointed out, even though the image makes it seem like we're going to be talking about the San Andreas Fault, this is not, in fact, about the San Andreas Fault, but about some other
The
faults.
Cascadia Subduction Zone, that's it.
Okay, Cascadia Subduction Zone. Okay, we're going to be seduced into disaster.
Subduction. We're not gonna fuck the Cascadia
No, we are
Zone.
fucking Cascadia. What are you talking? Or is the Cascadia Zone gonna fuck us? That's the
I think that one's it. I think the
yeah.
lessons of this article are going to be nobody should ever live on the fucking West Coast. Holy shit. That place should not exist.
I mean, it's even. I don't know if this article is even gonna touch it, but like all the stories you hear about Yellowstone Park as well, and it's just like there's so many places where people live where it's like why, like at any moment this can go off like a time bomb and just destroy everything.
Yeah.
Seductions.
Yeah.
So yeah, so stay safe out there, folks. And yeah, we'll go through this, and we'll. I guess you framed it to me as well that it's going to have some implications to disaster relief generally, and I'm curious to see if we can learn because this was written in 2015. So I'm curious to see to what extent have we learned things from this? Have we not learned things from this? And are we going to be screwed when disaster inevitably strikes, like it so often does when we're, I guess, not well, we're never ready for random earthquakes. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big thing about this article is also going to be looking at what just happened in BC and then just and like what has been happening with the fires for the past couple of years and everything else and then just like seeing the possibilities inherent in like this earthquake will happen one day type of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess we're gonna get into it, but sometimes like the window of these things happening are like so large that it's hard for us to like frame it.
Yeah,
Like,
that's kind of it. Like it gets into the most recent one of these earthquakes that did happen. Um and it's very much just like, oh fuck.
you calling
Muta,
for?
yes, I'm calling for earthquakes. Earthquakes now.
Oh Lord.
What do we want? Earthquakes. When do we want them? Now.
Yeah, I'm down for some fun shakeups. Just don't want to be anywhere near them when they happen. You know.
Hmm.
All right, here we go. It's also insane to know. Like we're right at the beginning of this thing. I I almost can't believe that the earthquake in Japan was like 10 years ago. I feel old. I remember when the videos came in from that. It was like horrifying. Quake apologists. Oh yeah. Joanna Wagstaff from the CBC did a limited run podcast on what would a large scale earthquake, I'm guessing, look like in the BC
In
would do
the
to the province.
BC,
Okay.
yeah. Um, they ain't ready and they're doomed. Yeah, yeah. No, this article is also going to be a little bit like that. More focused on like Oregon and Washington and like Northern California because it's American. But yeah, no, it's not going to be good. It's going to be real bad.
I wanted to mention briefly as well, in terms of the BC flooding that happened. I was just on Hildebeest's channel today, and they were watching a recently produced CBC documentary for their program, The Fifth Estate, I believe it's called, about the BC flood that happened. And it's amazing that they were able to produce a documentary in such like quick turnaround. But it was criticisms of the CBC always, but it was a pretty good piece of footage just documenting what's going on there. So I always think of the Fifth Element. It's weird to be deep into adulthood where some recognizably similar version of yourself was there for events that are now a decade old. it hits different from the remembering something from when you were like 14. Yeah, that's right. Like, because it happened when I was an adult. So now I'm remembering things from 10 years ago when I was already an adult. It's like weird.
Tim, you got the age that I was 10 years ago exactly right.
Your blood, yeah. Igloo, yeah. No, that's wild.
Yeah,
I've
Igloo, the first like section of the article is on the 2011 tsunami and just like how it kind of upended some like seismology stuff of just being like, oh fuck, things are worse than we thought.
I always remember too. Like, there's this one video. I know we haven't even started the fucking article. Like, there was this one video of like this Japanese man who was driving home, and he turns a corner, and like he's filming the whole time, like has this thing, but he's like driving normally. Then all of a sudden he turns the corner, and there's just this wave of water like comes in, and then he looks out the back window, and a wave of water comes in there, and then he almost just sits there resigned to the fact of like, well, I'm fucked. And then the rest of the video is him just gliding, like bumping around in his car as the waves are just taking him everywhere. Just like
We should find that.
it's just wild. Like it would just like hit him. It's like, well, I'm gonna die. I might as well just go with the flow. He managed to survive, but it was like it's an oddly haunting video.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. When the 2011 earthquake and tsunami struck Tohoku, Japan, Chris Goldfinger was 200 miles away in the city of Kashiwa. At an international meeting on seismology, as the shaking started, everyone in the room began to laugh. Earthquakes are common in Japan. That was the third of the week, and the participants were, after all, at a seismology conference. Then everyone in the room checked the time. Seismologists know that how long an earthquake lasts is a decent proxy for its magnitude. The 1989 earthquake in Loma Prieta, California, which killed 63 people and caused $6 billion worth of damage, lasted about 15 seconds and had a magnitude of 6.9. A 30-second earthquake generally has a magnitude in the mid sevens. A minute-long earthquake is in the high sevens. A 2-minute quake has entered the eights, and a 3-minute quake is in the high eights. By 4 minutes, an earthquake has hit magnitude 9. When Goldfinger looked at his watch, it was 2:45. The conference was wrapping up for the day. He was thinking about sushi. The speaker at the lectern was wondering if he should carry on with his talk. The earthquake was not particularly strong. Then it ticked past the 60-second mark, making it longer than the others that week. The shaking intensified. The seats in the conference room were small plastic desks with wheels. Goldfinger, who was tall and solidly built, thought, no way am I crouching under one of these for cover. At a minute and a half, everyone in the room got up and went outside. It's even weird to me to imagine, because I've never been in an earthquake, like how long an earthquake could last, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't even imagine, like if it's shaking for 4 minutes, that would be so weird.
I mean, I don't think that it goes.
Not usually. I
Well,
mean, most of them are around
yeah,
6.9 on the Richter, or like not most, but like some of the bigger ones have been like in the six on the Richter
yeah.
scale.
And it gets into it later, but it talks about how the Richter scale is exponential. So it's not like in terms of like severity. So it's not as if like a 6.9 and a 10 are like, just like three whatever measures apart. It's like just a huge, huge difference in terms of like the actual strength and effect, which I don't think is often like as appreciated. Um, I think that is the video,
This was
but
not
can we
the
get into it? Is it
Yeah.
not?
This was not the video I was thinking of.
Wow.
The video I was thinking of it was in some a documentary on it, but I can't even remember the name of the documentary or any of that. But I will keep reading. It was March. There was a chill in the air and snow flurries, but no snow on the ground. Nor, from the feel of it, was there ground on the ground. The earth snapped and popped and rippled. It was, Goldfinger thought, like driving through rocky terrain in a vehicle with no shocks. If both the vehicle and the terrain were also on a raft in high seas. The quake passed the 2-minute mark. The trees, still hung with the previous autumn's dead leaves, were making a strange rattling sound. The flagpole atop the building he and his colleagues had just vacated was whipping through an arc of 40 degrees. The building itself was base isolated, the seismic safety technology in which the body of a structure rests on immovable bearings rather than directly on its foundation. Goldfinger lurched over to take a look. The base was lurching, too, back and forth, a foot at a time, digging a trench in the yard. He thought better of it and lurched away. His watch swept past the 3-minute mark and kept going. That's wild.
Yeah.
Oh shit, Goldfinger thought. That's kind of feelings that I would say. Although not in dread at first, in amazement. For decades, seismologists had believed that Japan could not experience an earthquake stronger than magnitude 8.4. In 2005, however, at a conference in Hokudan, a Japanese geologist named Yasutaka Ikeda had argued that the nation should expect a magnitude 9.0 in the near future, with catastrophic consequences, because Japan's famous earthquake and tsunami preparedness, including the height of its seawalls, was based on incorrect science. That's not good.
Hmm.
And you can see already how this kind of links back to BC with the whole lake issue.
Yeah.
The presentation was met with polite applause and thereafter largely ignored. Now, Goldfinger realized as the shaking hit the 4-minute mark, the planet was proving the Japanese Cassandra right. For a moment, that was pretty cool. A real-time revolution in earthquake science. Almost Almost immediately, though, it became extremely uncool because Goldfinger and every other seismologist standing outside in Kashiwa knew what was coming. One of them pulled out a cell phone and started streaming videos from the Japanese broadcasting station, NHK, shot by helicopters that had flown out to sea soon after the shaking started. 30 minutes after Goldfinger first stepped outside, he watched the tsunami roll in real time on a 2-inch screen. In the end, the magnitude 9.0 Tohoku earthquake and subsequent tsunami killed more than 18,000 people.
Yeah.
Devastated northeast Japan, triggered the meltdown at the Fukushima power plant, and cost an estimated $220 billion. The shaking earlier in the week turned out to be the foreshocks of the largest earthquake in the nation's recorded history. But for Chris Goldfinger, a paleoseismologist at Oregon State University and one of the world's leading experts on little-known fault line, the main quake was itself a kind of foreshock, a preview of another quake still to come. Now, do you want to watch the video? Is that sort of the...
Yeah, I think we've ended the Japan part. We got to the actual like tsunami and everything. So I think now we get to watch.
I did want to comment too because I think it was Two Cars that mentioned Two Cars said, my more conspiracy minded sister was concerned about radiation clouds hitting us across the Pacific and swore off seafood for years. I remember them when there was like, that was a huge conspiracy theory. And they kept showing those like images of like the clouds coming over and how it was going to like coat the West Coast in radiation. And there was absolutely no scientific evidence that that would have happened.
It is kind of weird because like, you can still like see in pretty much all tuna and like a lot of fish, especially in the Western Pacific, like you can see the markers of like radiation from when the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, let alone from the Fukushima power plant. Like, it's one of those, like, yeah, the radiation did fucking go everywhere. Like, one of the arguments for the start of the Anthropocene is the presence of, like, this nuclear radiation because it is literally in everything and is now a part of the geological record. But then also it's like, then there's like this aspect to it where it's like because people don't understand how radiation works, they're just like, it's gonna get us.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the interesting thing because like radiation is something that like at low levels, I mean, like we get solar radiation constantly, right? So that like there's levels of like how much radiation is bad and what is just like at the normal rate. Like I think one of the other interesting things, like you mentioned, the nuclear bombs, But I think one of the bigger thing that scattered nuclear waste all across the globe was the Challenger explosion, because like it blew up in the atmosphere and like basically launched nuclear waste from the rocket uh, all over the planet.
Yeah. I
So
mean, like,
yeah,
that's the thing is like, yeah, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were, small in comparison to a lot of others. But then there were also the like huge like nuclear testing. And that happened kind of globally, but especially again in the Pacific. Um where like they were testing the bombs on quote unquote abandoned islands
yeah,
where they had forcibly like taken people or left them there so that they could study the effects of radiation on their bodies. And yeah, like, and then also like Chernobyl and like the the few in the US that melted down. Like it's just like I don't know.
but it's also interesting like when people study Chernobyl now, because like it's bad like if you're at where like the reactor was, but like
Mhm.
and there's possible like certain cancers and stuff from people who got like irradiated from it. But I think
Yeah.
like I've read some reports that like it was largely overblown the extent to which people thought it was going to do damage when the plant blew up. But I don't know. That's something that I would have to look more into again.
Yeah, no, and like that's the thing too, right? Where it's like one, we don't fully know or understand the effects yet. Two, like as it turns out, in a lot of ways, like industrial society is still worse than radiation
Yeah.
poisoning. Like,
No, I mean, it is amazing the degree to which, like, again, like our fear of nuclear technology, which I think is like legitimate. Like, I'm not saying this to like extremely downplay it, but it's like the fact of like coal is really fucking us up, and like almost no one's afraid of coal. And I wonder if like part of that is like in the 1800s, I guess it would have been a little different when you had like people working and getting black lung and like the coal mines and stuff like this. And we don't have as much as that of that anymore, or at least nothing that is as visible, I guess, as a marker of like coal.
yeah.
Although we do have smog laden cities. I don't know. I can't explain people's fear responses. Anyways, let's watch a clip of part of the tsunami. Driver films moment his car is engulfed by tsunami.
Oh, can you stream it to me?
Yeah, I wonder as well if I can find the clip that I was thinking of. You got it?
Yep. Oh yeah, so this is just the water hitting the car less than.
I mean, but it fully engulfs it. The one that I remember, it was like literally the dude, like it's just like his car like raises up and like he floats through the thing. Like it was like very weird. And I remember it being better quality. Although this has an element of it, of the one I remember was the guy was parked like literally behind someone else. Anyways, see if just do a quick search, see if anything catches my eye, and then back to this one, filmed by driver in his car. That might actually be it.
地震からおよそ1時間が経った午後4時前、渋滞で
Yeah, this one
津
might.
波がもうすでに到着してきて
Yeah, I
たんで
think
す
this
ね。
was the.
これは室賀さんが持っていたカメラで撮影した写真。後方を
Or
写した
no,
写
I
真
mean,
から
or
は
this is them doing fancy stuff to it.
出したのはこの場所。
But it was like this, and then them just floating around the city,
Yeah.
just like
この辺で
how
脱出し
wild
たか
that
も
was.
しれないですね。水が急に
Of just knowing it's like, you know, what do you do in that instant? Like you open your car door and you're fucked. So you just sit in there hoping that like no water starts pouring in, and just let it take you where it takes you. You know, very
Yeah.
surreal experience.
Yeah, no, and it is very much like, oh, you just kind of like it has hit. There is nothing to do anymore.
I mean, there was I crashed my car once, and there was an element where like so I caught black ice and my car spun out, and I started going like sideways down the 401, which is like the main highway, and then I tried to do the thing like the proper ways where you steer into the slide and all this stuff, but like literally no matter how I turned my steering wheel, my car wasn't moving. I was just going down sideways. And I had that moment of like resignation of just like, all right, it's out of my control. Let it take me where it takes me, you know? It's a very weird feeling. Sit there and start singing Boat on the River. Sunroof sounds so good now. Yeah, jeez. All right. Most people in the United States know just one fault line by name, the San Andreas, which runs nearly the length of California and is perpetually rumored to be on the verge of unleashing the big one. That rumor is misleading. No matter what the San Andreas ever does, every fault line has an upper limit to its potency, determined by its length and width and by how far it can slip. For the San Andreas, one of the most extensively studied and best understood fault lines in the world, that upper limit is roughly an 8.2, a powerful earthquake. But because the Richter scale is logarithmic, only 6% as strong as the 2011 event in Japan.
Okay. So logarithmic, not exponential. My bad.
Yeah. New Yorker and their fucking cartoons. What is this shit? Perhaps
I don't
it's
think that it relates at all.
No, it doesn't.
I think, yeah.
I don't even like get what it's supposed to be though. Oh, I guess like they're trying to investigate this person. He spilt so much beans that it exhausted them or something.
Sure.
Aha!
I don't know. I'm not looking at it.
And hello, Hildebeest. Everyone again should go follow them. I do say we watched. I already mentioned Hildy that we were watching earlier on your stream that CBC documentary on the BC floods, which was really good. And speaking of which, we're talking about earthquakes generally. So just north of the San Andreas, however, lies another fault line known as the Cascadia Subduction. I wish it was subduction, but you know, we'll do. It runs for 700 miles off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, beginning near Cape Mendocino, California, continuing along Oregon and Washington, and terminating around Vancouver Island. Stay safe out there, two
Woohoo.
cars. The Cascadia part of its name comes from the Cascade Range, a chain of volcanic mountains that follow the same course 100 or so miles inland. The subduction zone part refers to a region of the planet where one tectonic plate is sliding underneath, subducting another. Tectonic plates are those slabs of mantle and crust that, in their epochs long drift, rearrange the Earth's continents and oceans. Most of the time, their movement is slow, harmless, and all but undetectable. Occasionally, at the borders where they meet, it is not. It makes the ground do a shaky shake, is, I think, the subtext.
Yeah. Something like that.
Stupid, sexy fault lines. I'm still. Oh yeah, it is the anniversary of the École Polytechnique. You know, I'm actually surprised I haven't heard much about it this year. I don't know if it's because of COVID and like I haven't been out in the world, or like I don't know if it's also like I guess when I was a university student or even I had cable, it would be more prevalent to me. But I did not hear any of that. And yes, this stream is high on soy for whoever asked that question. I in fact injected the soy right into my eyeballs just for you. So is today just so Vienna was born on like disaster day? Is that
No, because it was yesterday. I was born the day before disaster day.
apparently it's the anniversary of the
I was
Halifax Harbor.
born, and I was born, and the world the next day was like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
and then it decided to do everything.
Take your hands and hold them palms down, middle fingertips touching. Okay, here we go. We'll do the experiment live, all right? Your right hand represents North American tectonic plate, which bears on its back, among other things, our entire continent, from One World Trade Center to the Space Needle in Seattle. Your left hand represents an oceanic plate called Juan de Fuca. Fucha? Juan de Fuca? 90,000 square miles in size. The place where they meet is the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Now slide your left hand under your right one. That is what the Juan de Fuca plate is doing, slipping steadily beneath North America. So the left one is fucking the hell out of it. It's going right in,
Sure.
When you try it, your right hand will slide up your left arm, as if you were pushing up your sleeve. That is what North America is not doing. It is stuck, wedged tight against the surface of the other plate. Without moving your hands, curl your right knuckles up so that they point towards the ceiling. Under pressure from Juan de Fuca, the stuck edge of North America is bulging upwards and compressing eastwards at a rate of respectively 3 to 4 millimeters and 30 to 40 millimeters a year. It can do so for quite some time because, as continent stuff goes, it is young, made of rock that is still relatively elastic. Rocks like us get stiffer as they age. That's not the only thing that gets stiffer, am I right?
Stop. Stop.
Listen, we gotta make plate tectonics sexy, all right?
No, we don't.
Yeah, we do.
I don't.
We need to
want,
hear from chat. Chat, are plate tectonics
I don't want
sexy?
plate tectonic erotica.
That one is always pressuring us. See, yeah. Strike, slip, fault in the sheets, reverse fault in the streets, normal fault in the field. Your knuckles are the Rockies. Yeah, true. There you go. But it cannot do so indefinitely. There is a backstop. The Craton, that ancient unbudgeable mass at the center of the continent, and sooner or later, North America will rebound like a spring. If, on that occasion, only the southern part of the Cascadia Subduction Zone gives way, your first two fingers, say, the magnitude of the resulting quake will be somewhere between 8.0 and 8.6. That's the big one. If the entire zone gives way at once, an event that seismologists call a full margin rupture, the magnitude will be somewhere between 8.7 and 9.2. That's the very big one.
The real big one.
Volcanoes are the geological version of cumflation.
Tim, stop.
I am bringing sexy back to geography. Yes, we're doing this. Igloo already says that seismology sexy stuff already exists on the internet somewhere. In fear and anticipation, I slowly type in earthquake erotica into search. Flick your right fingers outward, forcefully, so that your hand flattens back down again. When the next very big earthquake hits the northwest edge of the continent, from California to Canada, and the continental shelf to the Cascades, will drop by as much as 6 feet and rebound 30 to 100 feet to the west, losing, within minutes, all the elevation and compression it has gained over centuries. Some of that shift will take place beneath the ocean, displacing a colossal quantity of seawater. Watch what your fingertips do when you flatten your hand. The water will surge upwards into a huge hill, then promptly collapse. One side will rush towards Japan, the other side will rush east in a 700-mile liquid wall that will reach the northwest coast, on average, 15 minutes after the earthquake begins. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
By the time the shaking has ceased and the tsunami has receded, the region will be unrecognizable. Kenneth Murphy, who directs FEMA's Region X, the division responsible for Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska, says, our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast. Okay, let's go
Wait, pull
find
up
out
Google
where.
Maps just to like, yeah. Yeah, because I did
Just
look
to-
that up while reading this article and I was like, oh fuck. It's oh my god.
This is Interstate 5 here.
Yeah.
This whole chunk here will just be bye bye.
Yeah.
Bye bye. That's wild.
Yeah, and it gets a lot more into the kind of like possibility of response, and some of it is genuinely just like
I wonder what that means for Vancouver though. Like Vancouver Island is gonna be fucked.
yeah.
But I wonder, like, I mean, unless like you're gonna get some sort of rising that occurs. Because didn't you say like the one area, like this area here, is just like a floodplain? Or no, the Richmond area. That's just a floodplain. So maybe Richmond will be taken out by like rising shores or something.
Yeah.
The fault goes west of Vancouver Island. Well, fun. The only thing that I'm thinking about two cars is like you might be saved the brunt of a tsunami given Vancouver Island, but I don't know.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Um yeah.
I tried I tried to look up earthquake rule 34, but it's almost entirely earthbenders and giants fucking, which causes earthquakes. Not the same thing. That is not the same thing. Richmond is unreality,
Unrelatedly.
unrelatedly built on really poor material that will liquefaction. It'll liquefy. I think is what you're trying to
Yeah.
tell. Tofino and other parts of the island are tsunami zones. Well, stay safe.
Goodbye, Tofino.
As long as you go while you're playing that Planet Smashers tune, then it's all right. We're going surfing in Tofino. Ba-da-bum.
The earthquake happens, goes on for like 4 minutes, and then you're just like, oh fuck, I got 15 minutes to play some real good tunes.
Listen, if you go out on like a giant skank pit, like I'm here for it. So Planet Smashers used to play Warp Tour all the time, and so every time I would go, they would get everyone. Do you know what skanking is, Vienna? It's like basically everyone's like moshing in a circle, but you do this like dance where you like kick your legs. It's usually done to ska music, and Planet Smashers are ska. And so there would be like thousands of us all just skanking in a giant circle to that song. Well, it was a good time. Going surfing in Tofino. Get wild and lose your mind. Seeing the effects of a
I don't know
quake.
what
Sorry.
song Orb has been doing this whole time, but like it's been every message, every like minute or 30 seconds since the start of stream.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening either. I approve of it though, Orvis. Keep being you. Trudeau going surfing in BC was all to prepare for the big one. Oh my god. god. I want video evidence of Jodie skanking. I don't know if there is video evidence. This is going back to like 2000s. 2000s. I think first Warp Tour I went to was in 2001. In the Pacific Northwest, and I will say in 2001, how old would you have been, Vienna? You would have been quite the young.
3, maybe 4.
Yeah. Excuse me. In the Pacific Northwest, the area of impact will cover some 140,000 square miles, including Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Eugene, Salem, the capital city of Oregon, Olympia, the capital of Washington, and some 7 million people. When the next full margin rupture happens, the region will suffer the worst natural disaster in the history of North America. Roughly 3,000 people died in San Francisco's 1906 earthquake. Almost 2,000 died in Hurricane Katrina. Almost 300 died in Hurricane Sandy. FEMA projects that nearly 13,000 people will die in the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami. Another 27,000 will be injured, and the agency expects that it will need to provide shelter for 1 million displaced people and food and water for another 2.5 million. This is one time that I'm hoping all the science is wrong, and it won't happen for another 1,000 years, Murphy says. I feel old now. In fact, the science is robust, and one of the chief scientists behind it is Chris Goldfinger. Speaking of ska bands from the 90s.
That is a reference I understand. Yes.
Do you not? Well, you probably don't know who Goldfinger is.
Yeah, come on. Of course I do. It was an Austin Powers movie.
Okay, but Goldfinger the band, they had their most known song was they did a cover of that like 99 red balloons. Na, 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 na.
Wait, fuck. No, I'm thinking of a James Bond book. Goldmember was Austin Powers.
Yeah.
Yes, Muta. I
Goldfinger
did
was
realize
James
that.
Bond though, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
And a James Bond book.
Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. The Goldfinger song, a cover of that song was pretty dope. Thanks to work done by him and his colleagues, we now know that the odds of the big Cascadia earthquake happening in the next 50 years are roughly 1 in 3. That's not great odds.
No.
The odds of the very big, and we got to think about this next 50 years. So we've already dug into how many years of that?
6.
6? Yeah, we're already 6 into the 50s. So we got 44 left to go. The odds of the very big one are roughly 1 in 10. Okay, get better. Even those numbers do not fully reflect the danger, or more to the point, how unprepared the Pacific Northwest is to face it. The truly worrisome figures in this story are these. 30 years ago, no one knew that the Cascadia Subduction Zone had ever produced a major earthquake. 45 years ago, no one even knew it existed. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about the fact that, like, we live on an Earth that has been hit by meteorites before, and we seem woefully unprepared for that as well.
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty unprepared for pretty much everything, as it turns out.
Orbit Shiva, I need to know what song you're singing in the chat. I'm so curious now.
I think it is Space Jam because Space Jam was said earlier.
Space Jam was in fact said. That is true.
And there has been mention of Jam multiple times.
Everybody get up. It's time to slam now. Yeah, I feel like you're right. I think it's Space Jam. Oh, God. In May of 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, together with their Corps of Discovery, set off from St. Louis on America's first official cross-country expedition.
I do hate this section, like, just because it is, like, very stupid.
Yeah. I will say, wonderfully
bullshit.
wonderfully satirized in the movie Almost Heroes, starring Matthew Perry and Chris Farley. I think Eugene Levy is even in that film. What a great, terribly great movie. Ada, go to bed. Sorry, my daughter is trying to sing to me underneath her door when she should be sleeping. Where am I? Oh yes, colonialism. 18 months later, they reached the Pacific Ocean and made camp near the present-day town of Astoria, Oregon. The United States was, at the time, 29 years old. Canada was not yet a country. The continent's far expanses were so unknown to its white explorers that Thomas Jefferson, who commissioned the journey, thought that the men would come across woolly mammoths. Native Americans had lived in the Northwest for millennia, but they had no written language, and the many things to which the arriving Europeans subjected them did not include seismological inquiries. Yeah, I don't really like this paragraph either. The newcomers took the land they encountered at face value, and at face value it was a fine, fast, cheap, temperate, fertile, and to all appearances remarkably benign. A century and a half elapsed before anyone had any inkling that the Pacific Northwest was not a quiet place, but a place in a long period of quiet. It took another 50 years to uncover and interpret the region's seismic history. Geology, as even geologists will tell you, is not normally the sexiest of disciplines. See, this is why
Yeah.
we have to sex it up. Come on.
No. No. We need to resist the sexification of geology.
There's that movie, The Fault in Our Stars. We need to make our like a version of that, like The Fault in Our Tectonic Plates. And we gotta bring
The
back the
Fault
one
in Our
actor.
Horny Rocks.
It hunkers down. Ooh, some dirt's getting dirty with earthly stuff, while the glory accrues to the human and the cosmic. See, like the Fault in Our Stars, when it should have been The Fault in Our Tectonic Plates. You see, we gotta make the dirt sexy. You know. To genetics,
Or don't watch that
neuroscience,
movie.
physics.
Don't watch that movie.
No, it's a terrible movie. It's. I just chose it because it had fault in it. That's the only reason. But sooner or later, every field has its field day. Grown. And the discovery of the Cascadia Subduction Zone stands as one of the greatest scientific detective stories of our time. The first clue came from geography. What is it? Extra thick fault lines. Are you saying The Fault in Our Stars made cancer sexy? Yes. It's been so long since
I mean, yeah,
seen
it kind of did.
Yeah.
It kind of did. But also, like, in the worst way possible.
Yes. Almost all of the world's most powerful earthquakes occur in the Ring of Fire. Hell yeah. Eating some spicy peppers over here. The volcanically, seismically volatile swath of the Pacific that runs from New Zealand up through Indonesia and Japan across the ocean to Alaska, and down the west coast of the Americas to Chile. Japan, 2011, magnitude 9.0. Indonesia, 2004, magnitude 9.1. Alaska, 1964, magnitude 9.2. Chile, 1960, magnitude 9.5. Not until the late 1960s, with the rise of the theory of plate tectonics, could geologists explain this pattern. Also, there was recently a volcano that erupted in Indonesia, I think over the weekend.
Yes.
The Ring of Fire, it turns out, is a song by Johnny Cash. Is really a ring of subduction zones. Nearly all the earthquakes in the region are caused by continental plates getting stuck on oceanic plates. As North America is stuck on Juan de Fuca, and then getting abruptly unstuck, and nearly all the volcanoes are caused by the oceanic plates sliding deep beneath the continental ones, eventually reaching temperatures and pressures so extreme that they melt the rock above them. Sexy wouldn't be the best descriptor? Deep. It did make it teenage horny though. You're not wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the best descriptor. But also teenage horny written by a like 30-year-old man. So
Who wrote it? Was it like one of those? Was it the YouTube
John
vlogger
Green.
dude? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought.
Yeah. The YouTube blogger dude is Hank Green mostly, though, nowadays, who is his brother.
I just know that like Charlie XCX had that boom clap song, whatever. That was I think, song for that movie.
Really?
Yeah. Boom clap, sound of my heart, that beat goes da 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 da. Yeah. The Pacific Northwest sits squarely within the Ring of Fire. Off its coast, an oceanic plate is slipping beneath a continental one. Inland, the Cascade volcanoes mark the line where, far below, the Juan de Fuca plate is heating up and melting everything above it. In other words, the Cascadia Subduction Zone has, as Goldfinger put it, all the right anatomical parts. Hello! And you say fault lines aren't sexy. Yet not once in recorded history has it caused a major earthquake, or, for that matter, any quake to speak of. By contrast, other subduction zones produce major earthquakes occasionally and minor ones all the time. Magnitude 5.0, magnitude 4.0, magnitude why are the neighbors moving their sofa at midnight? Aha! You can scarcely spend
Got him.
You can scarcely spend a week in Japan without feeling this sort of earthquake. You can spend a lifetime in many parts of the Northwest, several in fact, if you had them to spend. And not feel so much as a quiver. The question facing geologists in the 1970s was whether the Cascadia Subduction Zone had ever broken its eerie silence. In the late 1980s, Brian Atwater, a geologist with the United States Geological Survey and a graduate student named David Yamaguchi, found the answer, and another major clue in the Cascadia puzzle. Their discovery is best illustrated in a place called the Ghost Forest, a grove of western red cedars on the banks of the Copalis River near the Washington coast. When I paddled out to it last summer with Atwater and Yamaguchi, it was easy to see how it got its name. The cedars are spread out across a low salt marsh on a wide northern bend in the river, long dead but still standing. Leafless, branchless, barkless, they are reduced to their trunks and worn to a smooth silver gray, as if they had always carried their own tombstones inside them. What killed the trees in the ghost forest was salt water. It had long been assumed that they died slowly, as the sea level around them gradually rose and submerged their roots. But by 1987, Atwater, who had found in soil layers evidence of sudden land subsidence along the Washington coast, suspected that that was backward, that the trees had died quickly when the ground beneath them plummeted. To find out, he teamed up with Yamaguchi, a specialist in dendrochronology, the study of growth ring patterns in trees. Yamaguchi took samples of the cedars and found that they had died simultaneously in tree after tree. The final rings dated to the summer of 1699. Tonight we're going to party like it's 1699. Since
We're gonna drop it like we're trees in 1699.
Oh god. If a 30-year-old man was writing a sexy earthquake story, there would be a manic pixie dream girl who can be found sunbathing on most hazardous fault lines area in the later second act. Sounds about right.
It grounds her energy and then sets it free.
Yeah. Get John Green working on this immediately. Chip, chip. Since trees do not grow in the winter, he and Atwater concluded that sometime between August of 1699 and May of 1700, an earthquake had caused the land to drop and killed the cedars. That time frame predated by more than 100 years the written history of the Pacific Northwest, and so, by rights, the detective story should have ended there. But it did not. If you travel 5,000 miles due west from the Ghost Forest, you reach the northeast coast of Japan. As the events of 2011 made clear, that coast is vulnerable to tsunamis, and the Japanese have kept track of them since at least 599 AD. In that 1400-year history, one incident has long stood out for its strangeness. On the 8th day of the 12th month of the 12th year of the Genroku era, a 600-mile-long wave struck the coast, leveling homes, breaching a castle moat, and causing an accident at sea. The Japanese understood that tsunamis were the result of earthquakes, yet no one felt the ground shake before the Genroku event. The wave had no discernible origin when scientists began studying it. They called it an orphan tsunami. Sorry, I don't quite get it.
Because bar is backwards, so scotch is also backwards.
That's
That's
the
it.
joke.
That's
Maybe this
literally
is
it,
David
yeah.
Menzies. He's still looking for his scotch.
Sure. Why not? That's why
I
he's
don't
not
know.
wearing a mask either.
Yeah, true. Fair. Needs a hat. He lost his hat while looking for the scotch, all right? Finally, in a 1996 article in Nature, a seismologist named Kenji Satake
Satake?
and three colleagues drawing on the work of Atwater and Yamaguchi matched that orphan to its parent, and thereby filled in the blanks in the Cascadia story with uncanny specificity. At approximately 9 o'clock at night on January 26, 1700, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck the Pacific Northwest, causing sudden land subsidence, drowning coastal forests.
Subsidence.
Subsidence?
Yeah.
Sure.
The land was not subsisting.
Sure, I screwed up. Yeah. And out in the ocean, lifting up a wave half the length of a continent, it took roughly 15 minutes for the eastern half of that wave to strike the northwest coast. It took 10 hours for the other half to cross the ocean. It reached Japan on January 27th, 1700. By the local calendar, the 8th day of the 12th month of the 12th year of Genroku. Once scientists had reconstructed the 1700 earthquake, certain previously overlooked accounts also came to seem like clues. In 1964, Chief Louis Nukmes of the Huayat First Nation in British Columbia told a story passed down through 7 generations about the eradication of Vancouver Island's Pachana Bay people. I think it was at night time that the land shook, Nukmis recalled. According to another tribal history, they sank at once, where all drowned, not one survived. 100 years earlier, Billy Balch, a leader of the Makah tribe, recounted a similar story. Before his own time, he said, all the water had receded from Washington State's Nia Bay, then suddenly poured back in, inundating the entire region. Those who survived later found canoes hanging from the trees. In a 2005 study, Ruth Ludwin, then a seismologist at the University of Washington, together with 9 colleagues, collected and analyzed Native American reports of earthquakes and saltwater floods. Some of those reports contained enough information to estimate a date range for the events they described. On average, the midpoint of that range was 1701. I'd be curious to figure out like how they do that, you know?
I mean, Indigenous people in Australia, like they talk about how the oral histories stretch back something like 30,000 years. Like they're just infinitely older than like our written notions of history can understand in a lot of ways. And they have like means of kind of like fact checking one another in terms of like recalling the history and everything like that.
Yeah,
And like,
my question is more of just like I know so little about
oh
the
yeah, no, like
transmission of oral histories that I want to know how like what do historians do when they're dating this to go like to figure it out, you know?
well, I mean, in the earlier one, like it talked about 7 generations, and then like from the 1960s, so that's some manner of time frame there, I guess. And then like they might have talked about other significant events that happened, like maybe
Yeah,
political
no, yeah.
or otherwise. Like, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
It does not speak well of European Americans that such stories counted as evidence for a proposition only after that proposition had been proved. Still, the reconstruction of the Cascadia earthquake of 1700 is one of those rare natural puzzles whose pieces fit together as tectonic plates do not, perfectly. It is wonderful science. It was wonderful for science. And it was terrible news for the millions of inhabitants of the Pacific Northwest As Goldfinger put it, in the late 80s and early 90s, the paradigm shifted to,
Yeah.
this author is like simultaneously hilarious and so cringy.
I lean more towards hilarious, I gotta say. Also, I'm posting a picture in general chat in Discord. Can you pull that up real quick? Just because the reminded me of it. And it's one of the funniest things ever.
Oh, what the hell did I just do? Oh, I accidentally started dragging the wrong window. There's not a day where I don't think about the merchant mariner ship that went down in a hurricane, whose last broadcast was officially regarded as a rut-row. Oh my god. Rut-row spoken in a Scooby-Doo voice.
Scooby-Doo voice.
Hell was that?
And then someone's, hell was that? And then there's no other record of that shit.
Oh my god. That's like your dying words being
Uh-oh.
rut-row. Rut-row. That is a good way to go out. If you're gonna go out.
So good.
There's an interesting type of convergent phylogeny you can do with geographically separated groups. Really makes me wish my ancestors hadn't done a genocide. Yeah. Tim is from Australia, in case you're wondering where the specific genocide occurred. Tim, the only good Australian. That is a great prompt. Goldfinger told me in his lab at Oregon State, a low prefab building that a passing English major might reasonably mistake for maintenance department. Inside the lab is a walk-in freezer. Inside the freezer are floor-to-ceiling racks filled with cryptically labeled tubes, 4 inches in diameter and 5 feet long. Each tube contains a core sample of the seafloor. Each sample contains the history, written in sea flories, of the past 10,000 years. During subduction zone earthquakes, torrents of land rush off the continental slope, leaving a permanent deposit on the bottom of the ocean. By counting the number and the size of deposits in each sample, then comparing their extent and consistency along the length of the Cascadia Subduction Zone, Goldfinger and his colleagues were able to determine how much of the zone has ruptured, how often, and how drastically. Thanks to that work, we now know that the Pacific Northwest has experienced 41 subduction zone earthquakes in the past 10,000 years. Wild.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and
that's
then we
another.
get into time frames.
I know. I mean, like, it's always like the time frames of like. Have you ever seen? There's like a good one of these on the newest Cosmos. It's the very first episode of the Neil deGrasse Tyson version of Cosmos, where they go from like the Big Bang, and then go through the cosmic calendar, and like sort of like map out like how long it took from the Big Bang for like galaxies to form, et cetera, all the way to
Mhm.
like when life started on Earth, and then when like humans started, and like we're like a minute on the last day of January, like or December 31st of like an entire cosmic year. Like
Yeah.
all the rest of history occurred, and we're just this tiny little like nub on it. It's always like can't remember the word to put it. It's just like it like perspective, like it just puts you into how insignificant we are. Small and
Yeah,
insignificant.
the time scales, right?
Yeah.
I have a book that's literally about that like notion, especially like in relation to anthropogenic climate change and just like how timescales operate on like with like human notions of time and then like geologic and evolutionary notions. It's just like yeah, there's just so much of it.
Time. Which is abolished, by the way. That's
Yes.
why it's not actually.
Yeah, and that's further like that's further reason for its abolition in like in a lot of like the social senses is like our notion of time is inherently limited because of how short we make it. Like
Yeah.
we have compressed our own senses of time to like the minute and the second and whatever else when like we should be thinking of it in a lot larger scales.
Yeah. There was an interesting book that tries to like deal with the issue of time in a philosophical sense. Uh, I don't agree with it, but at least I like the fact that he tried to do it. It was Derek Parfit, and the book was called Reasons and Persons, and it was trying to do like, do we have moral obligations to like ourselves in the future and stuff like this. Really interesting question that get us out of like more of, because usually when you talk philosophy on ethical situations, it's always like the immediate stuff, not like future generations, let alone like you in the future.
Mhm.
I don't know. Interesting question.
Yeah. Fuck time, as always.
Yeah. Thanks to that work, we now know that the Pacific Northwest has experienced 41 subduction zone earthquakes. Okay, we said that one. If you divide 10,000 by 41, you get 243, which is Cascadia's recurrence interval, the average amount of time that elapses between earthquakes. That time span is dangerous both because it is too long, long enough for us to unwittingly build an entire civilization on top of our continent's worst fault line, and because it is not long enough. Counting from the earthquake of 1700, we are now 315 years into a 243-year cycle.
Woo!
So we've gone
Let's
like over.
go.
It is possible to quibble with that number. Recurrence intervals are averages, of course, and averages are tricky. 10 is the average of 9 and 11, but also of 18 and
9/11.
2. Oh. It is not possible, however, to dispute the scale of the problem. The devastation in Japan in 2011 was the result of a discrepancy between what the best science predicted and what the region was prepared to withstand. And being prepared is
Mhm.
the same will hold true in the Pacific Northwest, but here the discrepancy is enormous. The science part is fun, Goldfinger says, and I love doing it. But the gap between what we know and what we should do about it is getting bigger and bigger, and the action really needs to turn to responding. Otherwise, we're going to be hammered. I've always like, I mean, like, you're obviously going to agree with this, but the issue here really is the fact that, like, we do not prioritize long term thinking, let alone for climate change, but even for, like, disasters like this. Just because, like, everyone in their immediate self interest in terms of, like, capitalism, they're not, like, governments, businesses, nobody wants to make the initial investment to protect against something like this. There's nothing about our system that incentivizes this kind of like long-term consideration. Frustrating.
Sorry, I'm just reporting this person that showed up.
Stream Sniper Man.
Yes, who said COVID is a lie, Mussolini was pretty cool.
Jesus Christ, coming in hot.
Yeah, just going right for it.
Spending resources preparing for disasters is betting against yourself. Yeah. It's always the short-term goal. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, this thing might not happen for another couple hundred years. So no one wants to foot the bill now, let alone pay for like upkeep over time, because our system doesn't
What
incentivize it.
I'm currently reading, um, what is it? Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future or the Ministry of the Future. I can't remember if it's of or for, but basically the notion is like the Paris Agreement for like climate reduction or whatever realizes that they have no like enforcement mechanism, and so they build like a group that is basically supposed to go from country to country and be like, hey, are you actually like on track to meet these targets for climate change reduction. And journalists call it the Ministry of the Future, and so that's like the name that it gets referred to as. And like literally, like that is one of the things that they talk about is like how God, it's such a good book. First of all, it starts off with like a climate disaster hitting India and just like 20 million people dying. And so like that is the backdrop of everything else that happens. And you know, talking about like how do we think about concepts of like investment in future generations type of thing when like we have such a short-term like profit motivated society, and future generations are therefore always kind of worth less because you don't know when you'll get the return on investment type of thing. And yeah, like it's just ah, it's such a well done book. And like there's just I'm not finished it yet. I'm only like 100 pages in. But like at one point they form a black wing of the organization to like secretly using like UN funded money shut down coal plants by force and assassinate like major climate like major like oil pipeline makers and everything. Like it's so fucking cool. Um one of the things that really pisses me off though is the copy that I got is a more recently published like paperback copy that says that it was on like Obama's top books of the year list or something like that.
God.
And that fucking infuriates me. That man did this.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, like he bragged about like adding more coal and oil and everything like that. And like fracking started under Obama type of thing. Like, I hate that. I hate
Yeah.
him. I hate that he has any like cultural capital still. I think that every other president, like he should just be like every other president where they just kind of like fade. Like what the fuck's Jimmy Carter up to? Nobody gives a shit. What the fuck's Clinton up to? I don't know. Whatever. What the fuck's George W. Bush up to? I wish he were dead, but he's painting, I guess.
Well, Jimmy
Like,
Carter was like the only real one. Like he went around trying to like eradicate guinea worm and then like built houses. Like if that's good, what you're gonna do after your presidency is done, cool. All the power to you. Like go and build the houses for people and go eradicate diseases. Cool. Have fun.
yeah, and like he wrote a couple books or like whatever, and like advocated for peace in a few conflicts, and it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
That's, you know,
Like if you're
it's
gonna
like,
leverage your power for that, then yeah, go ahead.
yeah, you funded like the fucking Ecuadorian like militants and like the Guatemalan like death squads, but like now you're doing something a little bit that's less shitty. Okay, sure. Why don't you all do that? Just like go do something slightly less shitty and like try desperately to wash that blood off your hands. But Obama just like, no, I'm
Gonna talk
the
to
blood on my
banks.
hands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
More
we're
blood,
keeping it.
more blood.
Yeah, more blood. Ah,
Oh,
God.
yep.
Anyways, read that book if you have some spare money. Go pick it up. It's so good. It's been so fun.
Laugh my ass off. Just return, and that band comment is pretty funny to come in hot like that. Yeah, Jesus Christ. I didn't even catch it. Vienna was on it right away. I was just like, when Vienna told me what it was, that was wild. I mean, he's being propped up by the DNC network to be used as a puppet for policy hawking and stuff. I mean, didn't he call candidates and tell them to back out during the most recent primary race?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like that's what I mean. Like he's like, yeah, more blood, more blood. Like he just wants to keep going with it. And it's like, why can't you just like retire? Your hair went so gray, you're
yeah,
so old and tired. Like just chill finally.
yeah. That ain't happening.
Yeah.
He was too young. Anyways, so things were going to be hammered, and then he's like, "I've been through one of these massive earthquakes in the most seismically prepared nation on Earth. If that was Portland, Goldfinger finished the sentence with a shake of his head before he finished it with words. Let's just say I would rather not be here. The first sign that the Cascadia earthquake has begun will be a compressional wave radiating outward from the fault line. Compressional waves are fast-moving, high-frequency waves, audible to dogs and certain other animals, but experienced by humans only as a sudden jolt. They are not very harmful, but they are potentially very useful, since they travel fast enough to be detected by sensors 30 to 90 seconds ahead of other seismic waves. That is enough time for earthquake early warning systems, such as those in use throughout Japan, to automatically perform a variety of life-saving functions, shutting down railways and power plants, opening elevators and firehouse doors, alerting hospitals to halt surgeries, and triggering alarms so that the general public can take cover. The Pacific Northwest has no early warning systems. When the Cascadia earthquake begins, there will be, instead of a cacophony of barking dogs and a long suspended, what was that moment before the surface wave arrives? Surface waves are slower, lower frequency waves that move the ground both up and down and side to side. The shaking starting in earnest. So you gotta judge this cartoon. The heat is killing me. Let's get a drink in Little Antarctica. Who? Why? What is wrong with the New Yorker? What is wrong with you? I'm judging you severely.
It sucks so much.
Like, they occasionally have really good articles. Like, I'm not gonna lie. They sometimes produce some good work. But these cartoon things are just so silly.
I think it's incidental that a good article happens, though. Like, I don't think it's related to the New Yorker. I think the New Yorker can best be represented by the cartoons.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like every once in a while someone submits a proposal and like somebody busy like laughing at the cartoons is like, yeah, sure, whatever.
I think the reason why the cartoon is from 2009, yeah, that's weird. I think the reason why the New Yorker can produce some good work is because they at least allow for a more long form of journalism, I find. So often,
Yeah.
and of course, it's not, I never find in their work something that's going to be like really challenging the status quo or something like this, right? But at least you'll get like some investigative piece that's really in depth. Like, I really appreciated their work on Scientology, uh, and stuff like that, where they can really take the time, where this is like, or even in this article where like you can go in depth in this like scientific issue, and make a claim about our lack of preparedness, which is nice. Even if there was a warning system, the BC government would never send a text. Jesus Christ. John Horgan, what you doing?
Yeah.
John Horgan, what you doing? Okay. Soon after that shaking begins, the electrical grid will fail, likely everywhere, west of the Cascades and possibly well beyond. If it happens at night, the ensuing catastrophe will unfold in darkness. Yeah, that's terrible. In theory,
Yeah.
those who are at home when it hits should be safest. It is easy and relatively inexpensive to seismically safeguard a private dwelling. But, lulled into nonchalance by their seemingly benign environment, most people in the Pacific Northwest have not done so. That nonchalance will shatter instantly. So will everything made of glass. Anything indoors and unsecured will lurch across the floor or come crashing down. Bookshelves, lamps, computers, canisters of flour in the pantry, refrigerators will walk out of kitchens, unplugging themselves and toppling over. Water heaters will fall and smash interior gas lines. Houses that are not bolted to their foundation will slide off, or rather, they will stay put, obeying inertia while the foundations, together with the rest of the Northwest, jolt westward. Unmoored on the undulating ground, the homes will begin to collapse. That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Rachel just said that paints quite the picture.
Yeah.
Across the region, other larger structures will also start to fail. Until 1974, the state of Oregon had no seismic code, and few places in the Pacific Northwest had one appropriate to a magnitude 9.0 earthquake until 1994. The vast majority of buildings in the region were constructed before then. Ian Madden, who directs the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, dogamy, estimates that 75% of all structures in the state are not designed to withstand a major Cascadia earthquake. FEMA calculates that across the region, something on the order of 1 million buildings, more than 3,000 of them schools, will collapse or be compromised in the earthquake. So will half of all highways, bridges, 15 of the 17 bridges spanning Portland's 2 rivers, and 2/3 of railways and airports. Also, 1/3 of all fire stations, half of all police stations, and 2/3 of all hospitals. I mean, who gives a shit about them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Earthquakes are ACAB, am I right?
Yeah, 100% if we make it. You live in the Pacific Northwest. Start
I mean, listen,
undermining
you don't need
your
earthquakes.
local police
Yeah.
stations.
Fucking
Earthquake protection.
those Portlanders will be out there. They'll burn them before the tsunami even comes.
Earthquake happens. Portlanders realize they have 15 minutes.
We'll get into that juvenile detention center this time.
Every police station gone. Tsunami hits.
Oh my god. That's incredible. Earthquake ruins Seattle and Portland. Fucking Antifa. Yeah.
Exactly. We'll do it this time.
Just looking around the room right now, and I'm having a Jody's car sliding sideways moment. Oh, like while things are falling in the example that was read? I thought you were talking
Yeah.
about your own room right now, too, Cars. I was like, what? Are you
Us reading the
having a
article
stroke?
triggered the earthquake.
Yeah. Certain disasters stem from many small problems, conspiring to cause one very large problem. For want of a nail, the war was lost. For 15 independently insignificant errors, the jetliner was lost. Subduction zone earthquakes operate on the opposite principle. One enormous problem causes many other enormous problems. The shaking from the Cascadia quake will set off landslides throughout the region, up to 30,000 of them in Seattle alone. The city's emergency management office estimates. It will also induce a process called liquefaction, whereby seemingly solid ground starts behaving like a liquid, to the detriment of anything on top of it. Goodbye, Richmond. 15% of Seattle is built on liquefiable land, including 17 daycare centers and the homes of some 34,500 people. So is Oregon's critical energy infrastructure hub, a 6-mile stretch of Portland through which flows 90% of the state's liquid fuel and which houses everything from electrical substations to natural gas terminals. Together, the sloshing, sliding, and shaking will trigger fires, flooding, pipe failures, dam breaches, and hazardous material spills. Any one of these second-order disasters could swamp the original earthquake in terms of cost, damage, or casualties. And one of them definitely will. 4 to 6 minutes after the dogs start barking, the shaking will subside. For another few minutes, the region upended will continue to fall apart on its own. Then the wave will arrive, and the real destruction will begin.
Tsunami time.
Yeah. Among natural disasters, tsunamis may be the closest to being completely unsurvivable. The only likely way to outlive one is to not be there when it happens. So, well, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
To steer clear of the vulnerable area in the first place or get yourself to high ground as fast as possible. For the 71,000 people who live in Cascadia's inundation zone, that will mean evacuating in the narrow window after one disaster ends and before another begins. They will be notified to do so only by the earthquake itself. A vibrate alert system, Kevin Covels, the city planner for the town of Seaside, Oregon, jokes. And they are urged to leave on foot. Since the earthquake will render roads impassable, depending on location, they will have between 10 and 30 minutes to get out. That timeline does not allow for finding a flashlight, tending to an earthquake injury, hesitating amid the ruins of a home, searching for loved ones, or being a good Samaritan. When that tsunami is coming, you run. Jay Wilson, the chair of the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Commission, says, you protect yourself, you don't turn around, you don't go back to save anybody, you run for your life. Jesus.
Yeah.
Everyone should have exosuits? I mean, I wish just for fun, let alone for tsunami preparedness. Okay, so the question is, does the earthquake porn end with a tsunami shot? Listen, when we said make the earthquake sexy, I don't think it was for this moment, okay?
Viking said that or a geyser.
Oh my god. The time to save people from a tsunami is before it happens, but the region has not yet taken serious steps towards doing so. Hotels and businesses are not required to post evacuation routes or to provide employees with evacuation training. In Oregon, it has been illegal since 1995 to build hospitals, schools, firehouses, and police stations in the inundation zone. But those which are already in it can stay, and any other new construction is permissible. Energy facilities, hotels, retirement homes. In those cases, builders are required only to consult with Dogami about evacuation plans. So you come in and sit down, Ian Madden says, and I say, that's a stupid idea. And you say, thanks, now we've consulted. God bless the USA.
Yeah.
Gotta have my freedom to build a hotel in an induction zone. These
We
lack
will be induced.
or in induction. How do they word it again?
Inundated?
Inundation zone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you see, it would interfere with capital if they did fuck off. These lax safety policies guarantee that many people inside the inundation zone will not get out. 22% of Oregon's coastal population is 65 or older. 29% of the state's population is disabled, and that figure rises in many coastal counties. We can't save them, Kevin Couple says. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say, oh yeah, we'll go around and check on the elderly. No, we won't. Nor will anyone save the tourists. Washington State Park properties within the inundation zone see an average of 17,029 guests a day. Madden estimates that up to 150,000 people visit Oregon's beaches on summer weekends. Most of them won't have a clue as to how to evacuate, he says, and the beaches are the hardest place to evacuate from. Those who cannot get out of the inundation zone under their own power will quickly be overtaken by a greater one. A grown man is knocked over by ankle-deep water moving at 6.7 miles an hour. The tsunami will be moving more than twice that fast when it arrives. Its height will vary with the contours of the coast, from 20 feet to more than 100 feet. 100
Yeah.
feet!
And it gets worse.
It will not look like a Hakusai-style wave rising up from the surface of the sea and breaking from above. It will look like the whole ocean elevated, overtaking land. Nor will it be made only of water. Not once it reaches the shore. It will be a 5-story deluge of pickup trucks and door frames and cinder blocks and fishing boats and utility poles and everything else that once constituted the coastal towns of the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Those poor tourists. Want to live
Like
on
that's
the...
what. Sorry.
I was going to want to live on the frontier of immediate death at the hands of shaking rock.
Uh-huh. That's how it goes.
To see the full scale of the devastation when the tsunami recedes, you would need to be in the International Space Station. The inundation zone will be scoured of structures from California to Canada. The earthquake will have wrought its worst havoc west of the Cascades, but caused damage as far away as Sacramento, California. That's pretty inland. Hold that up, just in case you're wondering where the Sacramento is.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Oh, that's the I-5, isn't it?
Yep, that's the I-5 there.
Yeah. Oh, good luck, San Francisco. Good luck, San Jose.
Yeah. Yep. Now it's interesting because like it's going to depend on a lot of things because the San Francisco area is pretty hilly that I don't know what the elevation would differ. So it like likely will take out some of it but not all of it kind of thing.
Yeah, and it'll
Like
depend how bad, like, the drop because of the earthquake is, too.
yeah. Where the issue is really like all these coastal cities that are just on like the
Yeah,
beach floor,
yeah. But, California and the Pacific Northwest and probably, like, Greater Vancouver type of thing, all without power and possibly without the possibility of it being restored?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it'll be something else.
Mhm.
It'll be something else.
You just said coastal cities built around inlets, etc., look so cool on maps as someone who has always lived in the middle of farmland. I agree totally. Like it's just a very completely different way of like structuring a city to anything that I'm used to.
Like you can imagine something here, like if you lived in this Forks place and that tsunami's coming in, like you're inlet, but you got 100. Maybe it'll reach Forks because it's saying everything from I-5. I-5 is like in here, but then
I mean,
like,
I assume it's only I-5 counting that in the US. Oh, that is the US, I guess.
but you live close to like the mountains here, so it's like drive, drive to the mountain,
Y- You won't be able to drive though.
run to the mountain,
Yeah,
run.
run. Just run. That's it.
Yeah,
And that area is so wet that
oh my camera.
like already there's so many rivers and streams and everything. Like what would the bridges will be gone, I'm sure. Like
Yeah, yeah.
like look what just rain did to BC.
No, water is dangerous.
Yeah. But no earthquake, no 100-foot tall ocean just hitting.
100 foot tall with boats in it.
Yeah. And small towns in it.
Well, I mean, the initial hit is like, I mean, we'll take the small towns with it, but if you're in that small town, you're just getting waving boats and ocean
Well, in
debris.
Fork's case, it looks like it's in the second small
Yeah,
town,
yeah,
So it's like,
yeah, yes. In this randomly chosen city, yes, they'll be
yeah,
they'll be
yeah.
getting La
No, it's just
Push. La
if you're
Push will be
like,
going into Forks.
yeah, just gotta hope that La Push has, like a decent restaurant and that'll be what hits you type of thing.
Yeah.
Just a good snack, and then you're done.
Yeesh.
Hmm.
To see the full scale of devastation when the tsunami recedes, you would need to be in the International Space Station. The inundation zone will be scoured of structures from California to Canada. The earthquake will have wrought its worst havoc west of the Cascades but caused damage as far away as Sacramento, California, as distant from the worst hit areas as Fort Wayne, Indiana is from New York. FEMA expects to coordinate search and rescue operations across 100,000 square miles and in the waters off 453 miles of coastline. As for casualties, the figures I cited earlier, 27,000 injured, almost 13,000 dead, are based on the agency's official planning scenario, which has the earthquake striking at 9:41 a.m. on February 6th. If instead it strikes in the summer, when the beaches are full, those numbers could be off by a horrifying margin. Wine glasses, antique vases, Humpty Dumpty, hip bones, hearts. What breaks quickly generally mends slowly, if at all. OSPAC estimates that in the I-5 corridor, it will take between 1 and 3 months after the earthquake to restore electricity. Wild. A
Yeah.
month to a year to restore drinking water and sewer service. 6 months to a year to restore major highways, and 18 months to restore healthcare facilities. On the coast, those numbers go up. Whoever chooses or has no choice but to stay there will spend 3 to 6 months without electricity, 1 to 3 years without drinking water and sewage systems, and 3 or more years without hospitals. Those estimates do not apply to the tsunami inundation zone, which will remain all but uninhabitable for years. Why is Humpty Dumpty getting priority over hippos? I don't know, Eric. Gotta ask the author of this article. And hello.
Humpty Dumpty is cuter than hip bones. What can I say?
How much all this will cost is anyone's guess. FEMA puts every number on its relief and recovery plan except a price. But whatever the ultimate figure, and even though U.S. taxpayers will cover 75 to 100% of the damage, as happens in declared disasters, the economy of the Pacific Northwest will collapse. Crippled by a lack of basic services, businesses will fail or move away. Many residents will flee as well. OSPAC predicts a mass displacement event and a long-term population downturn. Chris Goldfinger didn't want to be there when it happened, but by many metrics, it will be as bad or worse to be there afterward. On the face of it, earthquakes seem to present us with problems of space. The way we live along fault lines, in brick buildings, in homes made valuable by their proximity to the sea. But, covertly, they also present us with problems of time. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but we are a young species, relatively speaking, with an average individual allotment of 70 years and 10. The brevity of our lives breeds a kind of temporal parochialism, an ignorance of or an indifference to those planetary gears which turn more slowly than our own. We were already talking about that. Yes.
Yeah.
This problem of this problem is bidirectional. The Cascadia Subduction Zone remained hidden from us for so long because we could not see deep enough into the past. It poses a danger to us today because we have not thought deeply enough about the future. That is no longer a problem of information. We now understand very well that the Cascadia fault line will someday, what the Cascadia fault line will someday do. Nor is it a problem of imagination. If you are so inclined, you can watch an earthquake destroy much of the West Coast this summer in Brad Payton's San Andreas, while in neighboring theaters, the world threatens to succumb to Armageddon by other means: viruses, robots, resource scarcity, zombies, aliens, plagues. As those movies attest, we excel at imagining future scenarios, including awful ones. But such apocalyptic visions are a form of escapism, not a moral summons, and still less a plan of action. Where we stumble is in conjuring up grim futures in a way that helps to avert them. I mean, this could even be applied to like the COVID shit as well, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was thinking, where it's like, it is very weird reading, that line from 2015 versus now to coming up on, are we coming up on 3 years? 2.
No, 2.
We're coming up on 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a lot better.
I mean,
Holy
3
shit.
years, god damn it, I would have been like, what is happening to me? What is happening?
But yeah, just like coming up on 2 years into a global pandemic that North America was entirely unprepared for, and then the US, it's talking about like, 13,000 dead or whatever. In the US, 800,000 people have died in the last 2 years of this disease. Like, to think that the US will like ever correct its like infrastructure issues in the Pacific Northwest for a hypothetical future earthquake.
Yeah. when it
And
just
that
left.
only 13,000 people will die?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Have they reached?
Chances are everybody like there is gone, type of thing.
I was gonna ask, has America reached 800,000 yet? It was getting close.
I think it's past it now.
No, it was. It was. They're at 788,000. This is, of course, based on. Could be based on shoddy numbers.
Worldometers.info has it listed at 807,877. There's the New York Times, though.
Yeah, I'm taking it from Google, but that could be. I don't know.
Cool. New York Times won't let me on because of a paywall to see COVID updates. That's quality journalism and nothing to do with why people are a little bit crazy about things.
The only thing is that you say it's a freebie eugenics genocide or whatever, knocking off all these people. The problem is, like, it indiscriminately will hurt everyone, not just like say assholes that we don't want in the world. You know. Not to say that we should want necessarily the death of all assholes. I mean, I have a few assholes in my family. I don't necessarily want them to die, even though they're assholes.
John Hopkins listed it as 788,000, but I don't
Yeah,
know what
that's
numbers they use, and they might only use like officially reported ones.
yeah. Anyways, that problem is not specific to earthquakes, of course. The Cascadia situation, a calamity in its own right, is also a parable for this age of ecological reckoning, and the questions it raises are ones that we all now face. How should a society respond to a looming crisis of uncertain timing, but of catastrophic proportions? How can it begin to right itself when its entire infrastructure and culture developed in a way that leaves it profoundly vulnerable to natural disaster?
COVID, like
Yeah.
again, right?
Yeah. The last person I met with in the Pacific Northwest was Doug Dougherty, the superintendent of
Already? I don't know.
Dougherty, the superintendent of schools for Seaside, which lies almost entirely within the tsunami inundation zone. Of the 4 schools that Dougherty oversees, with a total student population of 1,600, one is relatively safe. The others sit 5 to 15 feet above sea level. When the tsunami comes, they will be as much as 45 feet below it. In 2009, Dougherty told me he found some land for sale outside of the inundation zone and proposed building a new K 12 campus there. 4 years later, to foot the $128 million bill, the district put up a bond measure. The tax increase for residents amounted to $2.16 per $1,000 of property value. The measure failed by 62%. Dougherty tried seeking help from Oregon's congressional delegation, but came up empty. The state makes money available for seismic upgrades, but buildings within the inundation zone cannot apply. Well, that's silly. I mean, there's an extent to which, like, what can you do in this case, anyways? Like,
Yeah, well, it's
build thicker walls.
you know, it kind of makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, why would you apply for seismic upgrades when your building will not exist
Yeah, it will
15
not
minutes
survive it.
after
Yeah.
the earthquake hits anyways?
Unless, like, you could apply for floating devices or something. Floating pods. You build
Apply
pods
to
for people.
build a aircraft carrier in the city of Portland, Oregon that will house everybody when the time comes.
No, what they
The
do,
Portland Arc.
they gotta build escape pods for everyone that, like, launch you, like, past the inundation zone. You can just climb into your little kind of, and then
That's why
they'll have, like,
that's why I'm
little
saying aircraft
parachutes.
carrier though. It'll just like take off and float and then you'll have a roaming Portland, burning police stations everywhere.
See, I like my idea better. You climb into your little pod, and then it shoots you past the inundation zone, and then like a parachute deploys and like lowers your pod to the ground safely outside of where the tsunami can reach
Oh, look at Jody going for the individual
you.
option of, oh yeah, I have my private,
But each building has
pod, but
many launchers and pods,
mm-hmm,
and that's what
sure,
you apply
sure.
for the money.
Or you could do one big collective boat and
Yeah,
have
but
it
then
be,
everyone
a
has to get
community
to the boat.
organization.
So what you're suggesting is that once the wave is coming in, I'm like more than 15 minutes away from the aircraft carrier. I'm fucked.
It's a big aircraft carrier, Jody.
What is
It's
it?
the
Just
whole city of Portland.
It's the whole city. It just is the city of Portland, and it just raises it
Yeah.
up and like moves it away.
Yeah. So they'll actually build it under every existing building. So the tsunami comes and the whole city just lifts up and floats into the ocean.
At President, all Darity can do is make sure that his students know how to evacuate. Tube launching system. I still think my idea is better. Keep in mind that the poorest people will live in the most vulnerable places, e.g., floodplains, and have buildings that are much more prepared for earthquakes or tsunamis.
Much less prepared, I assume. But yeah. Vikings right. But Jody just wants a hyperloop. That's it.
My idea was not a hyperloop. It was tube cannons and pods. How?
That's basically what a hyperloop is.
No,
Except it's
not.
on a track.
A hyperloop is a really stupid idea because it works on compressed air that shoots you around in a tube, and if you puncture it, it's like it'll just crush the tube and kill everyone inside the hyperloop. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. I'm suggesting it's like a t-shirt cannon. You know when you go to a concert and they shoot like t-shirts into the crowd? It'll be like that, but you're shooting people out of the inundation zone. And rather than the shirts just hitting people, they will deploy a parachute and
Okay.
lower you.
How are your pods and tubes powered? Jet fuel?
By the earthquake, by friction.
Thermal power?
Right, you hit on the key thing that's going to disrupt both of our plans, which is that how do we know that the aircraft carrier or the tube launchers are not going to get destroyed in the initial earthquake? You know, how do you protect them?
Because they'll build the aircraft carrier to like seismic specifications, obviously.
Really,
The
really tall water
tubes,
slides.
you're right, they should be. We could do a compromise, the tubes could shoot you to the aircraft carrier. But but thermal, like
I'm just now
geothermal,
like all the pods
like
coming in and they're
geofriction.
smacking each other in the
There's just so the aircraft carrier has a giant sail that's like a spider web that just catches them all, and then you have to climb down. Where are you intending them to land? Are you just shooting them inland? Like they're just gonna land in Dakota?
So long as they're far away from the inundations, it doesn't matter. We can collect them later. Each pod will have track. Then it'll be easier to like track the pods, the scattered pods across the heartland, rather than look for them at like under the tsunami.
See, I think you should aim them at cities. Just like if any like inland city doesn't agree to fund proper like seismic infrastructure, then the threat is that the tubes, which yes, as somebody suggested, are nuclear powered, will be aimed at whatever capital city. So if the earthquake happens and that seismic thing hasn't been funded yet, that city's getting nuked.
Listen, we need right now to go to the board, the seaside boards in Oregon and pitch our plans, right?
Yeah, I think we can do it.
Oh my god. Some of them, however, will not be able to do so. At an elementary school in the community of Gearhart, the children will be trapped. They can't make it out from that school, Dougherty said. They have no place to go. On one side lies the ocean, on the other, a wide, roadless bog. When the tsunami comes, the only place to go in Gearhart is a small ridge just behind the school. At its tallest, it is 45 feet high, lower than the expected wave in a full margin earthquake. For now, the route to the ridge is marked by signs that say Temporary Tsunami Assembly Area. I asked Dougherty about the state's long range plan. There is no long range plan, he said. See, here, look, at this point, you could shoot them over the ridge and the bog if we had the cannon solution. See?
That is a long range plan.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Dougherty's office is deep inside the inundation zone, a few blocks from the beach. All day long, just out of sight, the ocean rises up and collapses, spilling foamy overlapping ovals onto the shore. 80 miles farther out, 10,000 feet below the surface of the sea, the hand of a geological clock is somewhere in its slow sweep. All across the region, seismologists are looking at their watches, wondering how long we have and what we will do before geological time catches up to our own. Hooray!
Woohoo.
I mean, it is true though. We're like, there's so many possible catastrophes that we are just going headfirst into with absolutely no preparedness of it whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like, and they just keep compounding on top of one another. Because, like, think about the fires the year after this happens.
Like forest fires, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like the fire season when there is no running water in the state.
Yeah, but it'll be so wet from the tsunami. I'm kidding.
It'll be so wet in areas that don't burn, right?
No, I'm
And
kidding.
even then, the salt water, like, if those trees aren't uprooted by the tsunami, they'll all be dead. They'll all be dry. Like,
You see, Orvis Cheval, the tsunami will be God's punishment for banning abortion.
yeah.
Because abortion is, in fact, sanctioned in the Bible.
And the Quran,
And the Quran, apparently. I was
I
not
think.
familiar with that.
It might just be Hadith, I'm not sure.
I mean, and it's not quite sanctioned in the Bible. I mean, God suggests, or well, somebody creates an abortifacient, and God does not seem upset by its use. Which I guess is like
Yeah.
quasi sanctioning it.
Yeah, no, I would say that. I don't think that it's
Excuse me.
feasible to build tsunami-proof buildings. Like, the way that Japan does it is they build seawalls, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can build a wall around an area, but in terms of the individual building, if you have windows that are at more than 100, like, less than 100 feet tall type of thing, like, they're going to shatter. Like,
So you make the building.
tsunamis, yeah, it's just like you die.
So
That's
what we
it.
got to do is you make the buildings earthquake proof, so they don't get damaged during the earthquake. And then once the tsunami hits, the house itself has like flotation devices that also serve as like airbags to blunt the force of the tsunami, and then you'll float to the top in your house, and it becomes its own flotation device. See?
Sure.
Who needs an energy?
Yeah.
Who needs an an engineer when you got this fucking guy right here? I got it all
To
figured
make a
out.
tsunami bubble shield.
Yeah. Uh, but also, people probably wouldn't want to base entire cities in tsunami zones. The issue is they already have.
Yeah, no, like that's the trouble. Like,
I mean, this
once,
gets into the time issue, you know.
yeah, and it also gets into the, like, I don't know, just like the familiarity that humans have. Like, even if a tsunami hit, like, and just like completely wiped out, Portland or Vancouver or LA or wherever, like, the people who survive would want to like move back, knowing that it would still be a possibility, knowing that like, you know,
'Cause it's
that
your
city
home.
will one day again face absolute disaster on a similar scale. Yeah, it's home, you know? Like, and that's kind of again the trouble with human time frames is like
That's
we
the issue.
associate things comfortably and then
I mean,
just let things yeah.
this is also a big issue with just like economics generally. Like I remember when locally when the Kellogg's factory closed and there was like tons of like think pieces written about it about like, oh, the factory workers will just move to where more factory jobs are. And it was like, why did they think that that was what was going to happen? Like most people, it's like imagine you're someone who works at a factory and you know you settle down for the long haul, you have kids, your kids have made friends, they're going to the schools locally, like you've made friends, you've got connections. Now all of a sudden your factory job closes, and then the quote unquote economy as some sort of like ethereal entity is just supposed to assume that you're going to leave and go to find where the jobs are. It's like, no, now look at like East London where things like you have a lot of unemployment, and the city has entered this phase of our existence when it's like, I don't know, maybe we could have prepared by that by like, I don't know, creating another place where people could work, you know? But instead they just assume that, oh, the people most people will just move to find the jobs, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. And you know, eventually they do, right? Like look at
Or
look at
they
Detroit.
stay and then yeah.
Look at the Rust Belt in a lot of ways. Like and Southern Ontario is the Rust Belt.
Yeah.
Like, you know, look at how many people have family or whatever in like the oil provinces now because you know the jobs in the factories and whatever else and the farms and just everything don't exist here anymore, and some of those skills might have been transferable, or it might have just been like they could be retrained easily enough that they went out west and worked on the oil fields during like the boom and whatever. You know, you just do, and I think that kind of shows that like it doesn't have to be this way where it's like, oh, we go and rebuild this city that was just like founded in a ridiculous spot. Um, and I think Orb makes a kind of like decent point with talking about if people had the actual freedom to travel freely within fluid housing and occupation and education and stuff after a generation or so, not many people would see a point in staying clumped. Like, yes, kind of. I see where you're going with it, like where it's like, yeah, like, you know, if people were living in a different way, then yeah, there would be like a much easier sense of like, okay, yeah, you know, here isn't really like a decent place to be anymore, so you move elsewhere rather than having to move or flee out of desperation.
This is the
Yeah, what are you pulling up?
well there's this. I might want to watch this, but this talk about just moving also reminds me of this great.
Let's
Oh
say, for the
God.
sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
True.
Wait.
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
Let's say, for the sake of argument.
Oh my god. Sell your house.
Think about how much worse. In some ways, it's almost better if the earthquake happens sooner.
So this is a video on the Cascadia Subduction Zone, so you can see. I wonder why, like, if they purposefully, or if it just hugs the coast of Vancouver Island, or if it purposefully is just not doing Canada. Let's see what this video has to offer. This is Kimono News.
Fall.
And this is from
will
2019.
start showing us signals before the earthquake occurs, things we would call precursors to the earthquake.
Harold Tobin is the director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network at UW. He says the giant fault line offshore is severely undermonitored. That's why he and other scientists submitted a proposal this month to get 4 new sensors offshore of Oregon, each drilled 1,000 feet below the seafloor.
That would actually potentially be a way to predict in advance that an earthquake is more likely. We don't have that ability now, but this kind of data could help us generate that ability.
The recent proposal was submitted to an agency called the International Ocean Drilling Program. The U.S. is a big supporter of this organization. This project will likely take several stages, millions of dollars, and many years to be completed if it's even approved in the first place. Harold says this proposal is just the start. They want to add dozens more monitors along the West Coast after this.
Certainly, it will help us do a better job of early warning when the earthquake starts.
I'm meteorologist Abby Acone.
Like, there is an element there of just like, so you'll sense it. Based on what we read, like, okay, you sensed it. Now what? Now you got to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah. But again, like, think about how much worse it'll be next century where, you know, the water levels are up
Yeah.
2-3 feet or whatever, if not more.
Are you telling me that we're
Like-
not going to do something to fix global warming?
We're locked in for that already. Like, even if we stop emissions now, we're still getting that.
No, this
Like-
is when, like, Elon Musk is going to blast particulate into the atmosphere and cause global cooling. Didn't you know? Terraform the planet. Artificially
sure,
change the
whatever.
climate.
They actually do that in the Ministry for the Future book. India, after the like disaster that kills 20 million people, which is just a heat wave. Like, it's just that. It's a wet bubble type of thing. But like, they launch particulate into the atmosphere and it gives 2 to 3 years of cooling, and then things pick up exactly where they left off, type of thing. And so, like, it's just like, you know, none of it does it. None of it works.
Two Cars raise a very good point, but then also Eric is suggesting my solution to the tsunami for the entire planet by just making us a big rubber shield.
I mean, Eric's saying a giant rubber boat, not a
Same.
shield.
Well, I mean, same deal.
Mm,
Boat, shield, it's still rubber.
yeah, true. You do got me there.
The boat just has to be really, really big. Yeah. There's a book that I have. I've yet to read it. It's a bit old now, so I don't know how it holds up. It's by somebody named Gwen Dyer. I don't know if you've heard of Gwen Dyer.
Yes.
I've enjoyed their work. They mostly write about war and stuff like this. You know, very critical of the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. But they have a book that's called Climate Wars. And the premise of that book, which I haven't read, I have it on my shelf that I was eventually going to get around to because I've read most of his other books. But the premise is basically that since, as you put it, we're locked in to climate change, that this puts pressure on governments to do what I was suggesting, which is, you know, artificially adjusting the climate by, you know, some measure, whether it's dumping particulate in the atmosphere or whatever they plan on do to cause some sort of cooling effect or mitigate the effects of climate change, right? And the reason why he calls the book Climate Wars is, like, for one, you're going to deal with, like, the resource effects of like not doing anything about climate change and having like water issues, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also the fact of like, once we start messing with basically the thermometer of Earth and intentionally doing it rather than the unintentionally doing it that we have been doing, who gets to set the like thermometer? You know what I mean? And then you're going to have to deal with the fact of like, what if China wants it 1 degree warmer, where we might want it 1 degree not as warm? And now we're like in some sort of arms race to like terraform the atmosphere or some shit, you know? So anyways, I eventually want to read that book, but it sounds pretty terrifying.
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.